They always told me family meant showing up. Birthdays, graduations, big wins and bad days. So I showed up. Even when they forgot my birthday. Even when I got promoted and no one texted. Even when Bella posted a podcast about sisterhood and didn't mention me once. I still showed up. But when it was her turn to celebrate, when they flew to Miami, toasted mimosas by the pool, posted matching outfits with captions like "all of us together," I wasn't even in the group chat. Not a maybe. Not a sorry, just silence. And that silence was loud enough to ruin me. I found out about the Miami trip on a Tuesday evening. Nothing special. Just me reheating leftover lasagna in the microwave and standing barefoot in my tiny kitchen. Still in my work, slacks, hair pulled back, bra off. Mentally checked out after 9 hours at Parker & Lowe LLP, the mid-sized law firm, where I worked front desk. The kind of evening that was supposed to be uneventful. My phone buzzed just as I sat on the couch, glass container balanced on my lap, fork already in hand. Mom's name lit up the screen. I considered letting it ring. Tuesdays were her favorite days to chat about meal prep, her Pilates instructor, or whether Bella's skin routine was still all organic. I didn't have the energy, but I picked up anyway. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice was overly bright, stretched like taffy, a little too cheerful. "We were just talking about you this morning. You should really come visit more. Anyway, I wanted to run something by you." I chewed, waiting, letting the silence fill the air. "We finally booked the hotel," she said, diving in without context. South Beach was filling up fast, but we got the last connecting rooms at the Fontainebleau. Isn't that wild? And apparently the rooftop brunch there is to die for. I saw it on TikTok. They bring your mimosas in these cute little coconuts. Bella is going to freak. I blinked, fork frozen halfway. "Hotel? What hotel?" I asked. "For the trip, honey," she said, like I should know. Bella's celebration, remember, she just hit 500,000 followers and the Miami-style weekly piece came out this week. It's such a big deal. We thought we'd really go all out this time. My stomach tightened. I hadn't heard a single word about this. "Wait, what trip? When are you going?" "Oh, we're flying out on the 14th. Just a few days," she said. Nothing huge. Bella didn't want to make a fuss. And did I miss something? Am I coming too? The line went quiet just for a beat. Not long, but long enough for me to feel it. That tiny breath of hesitation where a mother should kindly scramble to fix what she didn't realize was broken. "Oh honey," she said with that practiced softness that always meant something sharp was coming. "It's really just for Bella this time. She's had such a whirlwind year, and we thought it would be nice to do something special just for her. A girls' weekend, but just her and us. A content reset," she called it. My fork was still in my hand. I hadn't blinked in what felt like minutes. Mom kept talking. About the spa packages, about how Dad was actually considering going paddleboarding this time because his back was finally feeling better. About Bella's new partnership deal that was supposed to launch mid-trip. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't ask if I had plans or if I could afford to take time off or if I'd even want to go. She didn't ask anything. I made a sound. Some vague "oh wow" or "sounds fun" that I didn't even remember forming. She filled the silence like she always did with things that had nothing to do with me. Eventually she said she had to go because Bella needed help packing. She ended with a quick "love you," the same way someone might hang up with a neighbor they barely knew. When the call ended, I stared at the blank screen for a long time. The lasagna was cold again. I didn't even notice when I put the fork down. The thing is, it wasn't the first time. It wasn't even the 10th. But something about this felt different. Not bigger, not louder, just more final. Like they'd stopped pretending. Bella had always been the sun around which everything else orbited. Her birthdays turned into weekend getaways. Her job interviews became family milestones. Her mistakes were just learning curves. And I was the default setting. The support system, the backup dancer. And now they didn't even pretend I was part of the audience. I got up, dumped the lasagna in the sink, rinsed the dish in silence. My body moved on autopilot while my mind tried to catch up to a simple fact: they were going to Miami without me. On purpose. And nobody thought it was weird enough to even warn me. I dried my hands on a towel, walked to the living room, and sat down again. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking of the cheap wall clock above my bookshelf. My phone was still on the coffee table. I picked it up, opened the family group chat. It was all there. Pictures of Bella's new headshots. Links to the Miami-style weekly article. A short clip of her unboxing PR packages with Dad in the background filming and laughing. And comment after comment from Mom and Bella. Our star. So proud. This deserves something special. Not a single mention of me. Not a "hey, should we invite Haley?" I scrolled up. Birthday plans from last month. I wasn't in the photo. I wasn't even tagged. The last time anyone had typed my name in that chat was 3 months ago. I had sent a picture of Grandma's memorial plaque and no one had replied. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I pressed and held the chat and clicked delete. Not mute, not archive, just gone. My hand hovered for a second before setting the phone back down. The silence in the apartment stretched. I could still hear Mom's voice, cheerful and hollow, naming brands and brunches like they were family values. I walked into the bedroom and opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment. Then I typed studio apartment Miami 1-bedroom Craigslist. I wasn't angry. Not yet, not even hurt. What I felt was emptiness. A clean, echoing absence. And something told me that might be a good place to start. I couldn't sleep that night. Not from rage or sadness or anything dramatic. Just that restless, hollow energy that comes when something inside you finally snaps into place. Not loudly, quietly. Like a click you feel more than hear. I kept thinking about the chat. Not what was in it, but what wasn't. I hadn't realized how long it had been since my name had appeared in that thread. So I opened it again. The last few messages were Bella's story reposted 3 times by Mom with different captions. Studio shots in soft pink lighting. A boomerang of Bella laughing in oversized sunglasses. Someone had added fire emojis. Dad commented with a thumbs up. I scrolled back. A video of Bella's unboxing event. Clips of her media shoot. A message from Mom saying we should do something big when the magazine hits. No one replied because everyone agreed. And then I went further. My last message was a photo of Grandma's memorial plaque at the hospice garden. I had captioned it with something short. She would have loved the wind chimes today. No one had responded. That had been 6 weeks ago. No one said thank you. No one even hit the like button. I stared at that line of silence under the photo and realized I wasn't part of the family narrative anymore. Not a supporting role. Not even background. I didn't scroll further. I just held down the chat, tapped delete, and watched it disappear like it had never existed. A part of me thought I'd feel something. Regret maybe. But no, just space. It was 2 in the morning, but I opened my laptop again. This time I wasn't looking at Miami vacation spots. I typed in something different. Studio apartment Wynwood Bakery 1-bedroom. I found a listing almost immediately. Studio above a Cuban bakery. Wood floors. Private entrance. Small kitchen. Big window. A photo showed the front of the building with a chipped red door and a mural of a coffee cup painted along the side. Rent was manageable. Available immediately. Contact Maria. I didn't message her that night. I just saved the post and closed the laptop. Then, I laid back on my couch, arms folded under my head, and stared at the ceiling until the sun started crawling across the blinds. The next morning, I didn't go into work right away. I called in a personal day and texted my supervisor. She didn't ask why. I think she heard something in my voice and decided to let it be. By 9, I was standing on the cracked sidewalk in Wynwood, the air already thick with the smell of fresh bread and powdered sugar. The bakery downstairs had a hand-painted sign, Elena's Panaderia. The woman who met me at the side door was small, gray-haired, and smelled faintly of cinnamon and strong coffee. Maria. She didn't ask many questions. Just handed me the key and let me walk up to the studio by myself. It was exactly like the photos. Small, sure, but not suffocating. The floor creaked with each step. The window was smudged but wide, letting in pale daylight that softened the yellow walls. There was a radiator under the window and a makeshift kitchen that was little more than a hot plate and a sink. But it had its own door, its own space, its own quiet. It didn't look like much, but to me it looked like freedom. Maria stood by the doorframe as I walked a slow circle around the room. "You want it?" she asked. I nodded. She smiled like she already knew. I signed the lease an hour later using the remainder of my quarterly bonus. No discussion, no negotiations, just me and a signature on paper that said this space belonged to me now. When I walked back outside, the heat hit me like a wall, but I didn't care. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment watching the bakery customers go in and out the street, humming with delivery trucks and music from someone's open window. No one here knew who I was. No one asked about Bella. No one looked at me like I was missing from someone else's story. That afternoon, I returned to my old apartment and packed without ceremony. Just cardboard boxes, trash bags, and a playlist I didn't listen to. I didn't sort through photos or reread old birthday cards. I didn't stop to decide what to keep. I took only what I needed. My bed frame didn't come with me. Just the mattress. I hauled it up 3 flights of stairs myself, pausing at each landing to catch my breath and curse under it. Every stumble, every bruise, every slip was mine. And weirdly, I was okay with that. By evening, I was lying on the mattress in the middle of the new studio. No sheets, no furniture. Just me, the window, and the scent of fried dough wafting from downstairs. And for the first time in what felt like years, I wasn't waiting for someone to notice I had moved. I didn't tell my parents, not my sister, not my old friends. Not even Marlene from HR, who always brought extra granola bars in her bag just for me. I didn't want advice, or concern, or pity. I didn't want permission. That night, I placed a small aloe vera plant on the windowsill. I had picked it up from a corner market on my walk back from the lease signing. It was in a cracked ceramic pot and cost less than a sandwich, but I liked how stubborn it looked. Like it had survived neglect and kept growing anyway. I didn't name it, I just watered it. And then I sat on the floor next to it, back against the wall, legs stretched out in front of me, and closed my eyes. Outside, someone honked. A siren wailed in the distance. The bakery was still open. I could hear the register ringing and the soft thud of the back door swinging shut. I let the noise settle around me like a blanket. This wasn't a punishment. Not for me. Not anymore. It was the start of something I hadn't had in a long time. Room to breathe. Room to become someone outside the orbit of someone else's spotlight. And I had no plans to shrink back into the shadow. The U-Haul was smaller than I thought it'd be. Or maybe my life had just shrunk over the years. 1 bookshelf, 1 twin mattress, 3 suitcases. The rest I either sold, donated, or left behind with a note that read, "Take what you need, leave the rest." It was humid when I moved. Florida never really knew how to keep its promises when it came to weather. I hauled the mattress up the narrow stairs by myself. My knees ached, and at one point I banged my shins so hard I had to sit down on the stoop outside the bakery below just to breathe. The sweet scent of cinnamon floated up from the vents. Someone inside was humming along to an old Billie Holiday tune. The apartment was small, studio-sized, with a peeling turquoise door and a leaky faucet I already knew I'd have to fix myself. But it had light. 1 tall window that caught the afternoon sun like a dream. I opened it, leaned out, and breathed in the smell of flour and coffee and yeast. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. No one asked where I went. No one noticed. I changed my number the next day. There was something oddly freeing about typing a string of new digits and hitting save. I called my bank, opened a new checking account, and locked the old one with a firm request to freeze access. I called HR at Parker and updated my emergency contact from Mom to Lindsay. Just her first name and work number, no explanation. She didn't ask. The furniture trickled in from thrift stores and curbside finds. A second-hand lamp with a wobbly base. A desk someone left beside a dumpster that, after a good sanding, looked halfway decent. I found joy in picking out spoons and mugs that didn't match. It was like building a life without having to match anyone's expectations. One evening, as I stood barefoot on the cold tile floor eating cereal for dinner, I thought about the poolside photos Bella had posted the same day. Her in that white two-piece standing between mom and dad, each of them holding a cocktail, all of them tan and smiling like life had always been this perfect. They didn't even pretend to miss me. That night, I deleted Instagram and Facebook. I even uninstalled the weather app that was still set to my old zip code. The next morning I woke up early, bought a clay pot from the corner shop and planted an aloe vera in it. The lady behind the counter told me it was low maintenance and hard to kill. Perfect, I said. It sat now on the windowsill catching light the same way my old life never had. I didn't tell anyone where I lived. There was something sacred about the silence. My mother once said that silence was what grew between people when they stopped trying. But to me this silence was chosen. Built. It held space for something real. Sometimes I'd pass the mirror on my way out and barely recognize myself. Not in a bad way, just quieter, more deliberate. I started walking in the mornings before work. Not for exercise, just to feel the ground, to learn the neighborhood. The sidewalks were cracked, but kind, lined with murals and stray cats and bakery smells. There was a kindness to this part of Wynwood, a strange kind of hush that didn't ask me to explain myself. One night I opened a journal and started a list called Things They Forgot. It included that I helped pay Bella's first year of college, that I flew home twice a month to help Nana with her medication, that I spent Christmas alone last year so they could have a trip to Aspen, that I still remember everyone's birthday without needing a reminder. I didn't write it out of bitterness, I just needed to see the truth on paper. To remind myself that I had always been there even when they acted like I wasn't. Outside, a car honked. Downstairs, someone started playing jazz on vinyl, the kind of music that makes you feel nostalgic for places you've never been. I lit a candle. Saturday cross-legged on the floor. Let the room stay messy. And then I smiled to myself as the aloe caught the last light of the day. I wasn't invisible here. I was quiet, yes. But in this quiet, I was finally beginning to feel real. The first morning of their trip, I opened my phone expecting at least a missed call. A text. A group chat ping. Nothing. By the third day, the silence had stretched so long it stopped feeling like an absence and started feeling like air. Instagram was the only thing that filled the space. I didn't follow Bella, but the algorithm knew better. She was everywhere. A sun-kissed shot in a white linen dress barefoot on a yacht off Miami Beach. One story showed her clinking glasses with someone who looked vaguely famous. Another smiling beside my mother in front of a branded step, and repeat the caption reading, "So proud of our girl. She's pure light. 9 days. Not one message. No, how are you? No, wish you were here." And yet I didn't cry. I didn't feel the sharp jealousy that used to rise in me like a reflex. I didn't even feel forgotten. What I felt was something softer. A kind of release I hadn't known I'd needed. On the 5th morning, I brought my coffee outside and sat on the curb before the city woke. A florist's van parked across the street. The driver, an older man with wiry white hair and a bandage on his finger, nodded at me as he carried 2 huge arrangements into a bakery. His silence was kind. No need for words. That day, I decided to start taking pictures. Not of myself. Not of outfits or food or whatever the internet pretended was real. Just mornings. My neighborhood slow and half-lit. A cat sleeping on a stoop. A coffee cup left on a bench still steaming. Someone tying their apron behind the counter. I didn't post them, I saved them. A folder called Proof of Mourning. By day 7 of their vacation, Bella had announced a new brand partnership in a post that looked like a magazine cover. Bright bikini high ponytail, her name tagged beside phrases like sun-kissed and global face of summer. Mom commented, "This is the beginning of your era, baby." Dad replied with fire emojis. Uncle Ray posted a prayer hands. Even Aunt Margie, who hadn't spoken to me since 2020, wrote, "Look at our star." I didn't even roll my eyes. I just closed the app and slid the phone face down on the counter. Later that night, as I stood brushing my teeth, I caught my own reflection in the mirror. Hair messy, skin flushed from the walk home, a loose shirt I'd bought from a thrift store hanging lopsided on my shoulders. I didn't look like a star. But for the first time in years, I didn't look like someone pretending to shine either. There were still small pangs, like when I passed a mother and daughter laughing in line at the grocery store. Or when I saw a group of friends taking a selfie at the beach shouting inside jokes I'd never be part of. But they didn't hurt the same way anymore. They were just reminders of something I used to want, not things I still needed. On the 9th night, I couldn't sleep. I walked down to the beach barefoot, a cardigan draped over my shoulders. The sand was cool, the waves slow and rhythmic like breathing. I sat down near a lifeguard tower and wrapped my arms around my knees. I thought about birthdays, how I always remembered everyone's propus. How I used to send cards with little jokes or poems or quotes they'd forget the next day. I remembered the year Bella forgot mine, then called me a week later, claiming she thought it was the following month. I'd laughed it off. I thought about Christmas. About how I stayed back to help Nana when they flew to Aspen. About the quiet dinner we had, the way Nana held my hand across the table and said, "Nothing about love should make you feel this lonely." I let my head fall back and looked up at the stars. And I realized I didn't miss them. Not really. I missed the version of us that I thought existed. The one where Mom asked how my day went without comparing it to Bella's. The one where Dad offered to walk me down the aisle someday even if no date was set. The one where Bella called to say I made her laugh. The one where I wasn't optional. But that version had only ever lived in my head. The real version never called. Never asked. Never looked past what was convenient. I stayed on the beach until the skies started to lighten. When I walked home, I stopped by the bodega and bought a single peach. I ate it on my windowsill while the city woke, watching a couple unlock their bikes, a kid chasing a pigeon, a jogger waving to the florist. And for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't waiting for someone to come find me. I was already here. The air that morning smelled like salt and coffee and something else, something clean like a beginning I hadn't named yet. I wrapped myself in a light sweater and stepped out onto the balcony with my camera slung across my shoulder, more out of habit than plan. Miami was still sleepy. Palm fronds shifted lazily in the breeze, and the sky held that soft cotton haze right before the sun peeled it open. I walked down toward the beach with no idea what I'd photograph. I just knew I needed to look at something that wasn't a screen. There were no families with strollers, yet no influencers trying to get the perfect back arch pose on rented cabanas. Just seagulls and the distant thud of someone dragging chairs across a deck. And then I saw it. A single white beach chair left behind, slightly askew as if someone had left in a hurry. No towel, no drink, no companion chairs. Just that chair and next to it one lone sandal. Not a pair. Just one. I stood there longer than I meant to. Something about the emptiness of the scene didn't feel empty at all. It felt intentional. It felt like something had happened, and maybe that something was me. I lifted the camera and clicked once. Then twice. I didn't adjust the lighting. I didn't even check the preview screen. I just walked back to my building with that image lodged behind my eyes. That afternoon, after warming up leftover soup and not finishing it, I opened my laptop. I had no intention of submitting to the Coastal Perspectives exhibit at the local gallery. I'd bookmarked the call for entries weeks ago, before the Miami trip, before everything. But now I uploaded the photo. Typed a title before I could talk myself out of it. Uninvited. Not bitter, not sarcastic. Just factual. I didn't think about it again. I closed the laptop, changed into leggings, and went downstairs to the gym to walk on the treadmill like it was a moving meditation. 2 days later, the email came. Congratulations. Your submission has been selected for exhibition. I read it 3 times. Each time the words felt more real, more stitched into my day, like something solid. My fingers hovered over my phone. I typed a message to Lindsay. They picked it. She replied almost instantly. Told you. That image says something. You're not just taking photos, you're telling the truth. I smiled. Not wide, not manic. Just soft and honest. She asked when the opening night was. I told her. She promised she'd show up with flowers and maybe a bottle of cheap bubbly to sneak in. I didn't tell my family. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't revenge. It just didn't feel like their news to celebrate. They'd chosen their version of family celebration. They'd gone to Miami without me, smiled for photos without me, toasted Bella's milestones without ever wondering where I might be. I didn't want to hand them this part of me and watch them misunderstand it. That night I scrolled through Instagram just to numb the time before bed. Bella had posted a new photo. Everyone in the family was gathered around a beach bonfire. Golden light, matching linen outfits. Dad holding a ukulele he probably didn't know how to play. Bella in the center like a lighthouse beaming confidence. The caption read, "Family means no one gets left behind." I didn't even blink. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because I wasn't surprised. They'd cropped me out before I had a chance to show up. That photo, so perfectly posed, so perfectly bright, was louder in what it didn't say than what it did. No tag, no mention. Just a broad-stroke statement to the world that this was their tribe. That nothing was missing. But something was missing. Someone. Me. I zoomed in for no good reason. Mom was laughing in the background, mouth wide, like she hadn't tasted silence in weeks. Aunt Karen had her hand on Bella's shoulder. Even my old dog Max was there, his leash looped through a beach chair leg. I was the only one not in that frame. And they knew it. They didn't forget me. They just edited me out in real time. For a second, I stared at the screen and wondered what they'd say if they saw "uninvited" on a wall. Would they recognize the sandal, the chair, the ache, or would they scroll past it like any other moment they never thought to ask about? I closed the app and flipped my phone face down. I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. Not wine. Not comfort food. Just something cold and clear and necessary. When I turned back toward the window, the sky had turned purple. That bruised color right before the first stars appeared. I whispered to no one in particular. They don't get to define me anymore. And then I sat at the table, opened my laptop again, and looked at the gallery email one more time. Not because I doubted it. Because I needed to remind myself that I was doing something they hadn't asked for, and it still mattered. I typed a short email to confirm attendance at the exhibit. No +1s, no RSVP for a party of 4. Just me. The next morning, I woke up early again, camera ready, heart steadier. The beach had already started to shift, and so had I. The coffee shop was quiet, tucked behind a row of palm trees just off Coral Street. I was waiting for a client, scrolling through the gallery's social post where they had announced the lineup for the exhibit. My name was on the flyer. It still felt unreal. A barista called out someone's latte order. I looked up. That's when she approached me. She wore a pale blue linen suit and walked like she didn't believe in wasting time. Probably in her early 40s, sharp eyes softened by smile lines. She tilted her head as she stopped beside my table. "Excuse me," she said casually. "Are you Haley Green?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, that's me." "I thought so," she said. "You're Bella's sister, right? I think I saw you in one of her family videos. The one on the beach. You were sitting by the fire." I felt my stomach drop. "A video," my throat tightened, but I forced a polite smile. "Sorry, which video?" She pulled out her phone, started tapping. "Oh, I follow Bella online. She's incredible. Her brand is so authentic. The way she talks about family and growth and healing, it's so refreshing. She had this story once about her older sister, and I swear she showed a clip of you guys roasting marshmallows. It was sweet." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. She went on, clearly not noticing my silence. She said something like, "My sister taught me how to live simply. How to sit with discomfort." It was beautiful. I even bookmarked that podcast. Gave it 5 stars. I finally found my voice. "Right. That must have been a while ago." She nodded. "Yeah, maybe last year. Anyway, it's lovely to meet you in person. I just wanted to say thanks. I mean, if you're the sister she talks about, then you've clearly inspired her a lot." She walked off, leaving behind the faint scent of grapefruit perfume and a crater in my chest. When I got home, I searched. It took less than a minute. Bella Owens, The Mindful Journey Podcast. Episode 24. Title: Family Isn't Always Loud. I pressed play. Her voice floated through my laptop speaker, soft and polished. She spoke about how she used to crave constant validation, but then her sister showed her the value of silence, the beauty of stillness. How her sister lived alone for a while, focused on nature, healing, minimalism. She never said my name. Not once. She never said Haley moved across the country. Haley pays her own bills. Haley takes photos not for money but because they mean something. She just called me my sister and turned me into a storybook chapter she could read aloud to fans. There were photos on her blog. Cropped versions of our family trips, our childhood bedrooms, a snapshot of my hand lighting a candle at a cabin retreat. Every image was curated to support her message. A message that apparently needed my life but not my presence. I sat frozen, staring at my laptop. Then I opened the gallery's website and looked at the photo again. Uninvited. There it was. A chair. A sandal. A void. I clicked into the caption editor. For the public description, they'd written shot at sunrise in coastal Florida. A study in stillness. I deleted it. I typed slowly, deliberately. Absence doesn't mean agreement. I stared at those words. Bella had turned me into a footnote in her success story. The thoughtful sister. The shadowed example. The woman who made her look more grounded without having to share the light. But I wasn't a symbol. I was real. And I was done being quiet. That night, Lindsay came over with Thai food and cans of ginger beer. We sat cross-legged on my floor while I showed her the video. She watched in silence, then exhaled through her teeth. "That's you," she said. "She's literally describing your life. Using your privacy like it's part of her merch line." I nodded. "You gonna tell her to take it down?" I shook my head. That's not the point." Then what is? I closed the laptop and looked at the framed print of uninvited on my wall. "That's the point," I said. "Let the truth live where everyone can see it." Lindsay smiled. "So the exhibit's your letter back." "Exactly." She lifted her can toward mine. "Cheers to that." We clinked and sipped. I didn't feel angry anymore. I felt clear, focused. The next morning I woke early and printed the new caption on a clean label. "Absence doesn't mean agreement." I carried it to the gallery in a small envelope and handed it to the curator. He glanced at the slip, then at me. "Powerful," he said. I smiled. "Thank you." By the time I walked out into the morning sun, I wasn't carrying anything anymore. No weight. No bitterness. Just truth. And that was finally enough. The receptionist called my name softly. I looked up from the file I was reviewing, pen still resting between my fingers. She tilted her head toward the front, her expression tight. "Someone's here to see you," she said. Didn't give a last name. Just said it's urgent. I stood smoothing my navy slacks, not expecting anything out of the ordinary. But the moment I turned the corner into the front lobby, I stopped. Bella was standing there. White dress, expensive. That sort of flowing cotton thing that makes influencers look effortless. A pale beige purse hung from her shoulder, probably worth more than my rent. And the sunglasses. Wide frames, glossy black, covering half her face. But not her mouth. Her mouth was set in that slightly amused smile she always wore when she wanted something. She pushed the glasses up onto her head as she stepped toward me. "Haley, finally. What are you doing, Moms? Been crying nonstop. You vanished without saying a word. I had to hear from some random comment online that you moved back here." I blinked once, then turned to lead her down the hallway without answering. The glass walls of our office conference room caught the morning light. I gestured inside and she followed. We were barely seated when she spoke again. "Look, I get it, okay, maybe I should have called. But you didn't come to Miami, you didn't come to the engagement dinner. People kept asking where you were and I didn't know what to say. It was like you just disappeared." I sat still, my hands folded on the table. "I didn't go to Miami because I wasn't invited." Her mouth parted slightly, then closed. She gave a small forced laugh. "Oh, come on. It wasn't personal. You know how things get with planning. I thought you were off the grid. Detoxing or something. You don't exactly answer your phone." I leaned back, folding my arms. That's the thing about being left off a list. Only the people who made the list get to pretend it wasn't personal. She looked away for a second, brushing invisible lint from her dress. Haley, don't make this into a whole thing. I've got a million people to coordinate, and Mom said you were in one of your minimalist phases again. You hate big parties. I didn't say anything. The silence between us stretched, and I watched her squirm in it. She crossed her legs and glanced at the glass wall. I was hoping we could talk. Like, really talk. Before things spiral out of hand. They already did, I said. Bella looked at me like I'd just missed my cue. Like she'd expected something softer. Maybe even an apology. She leaned forward. Okay, so maybe I should have handled things differently. But I'm still your sister. And you're out here turning my wedding into some exhibit. I looked at her. You mean the photograph? The one with the empty chair. She nodded. People are tagging me in it. Saying things. They think it's about me. I shrugged. It's not about you. It's about me not being there. She narrowed her eyes. That's semantics. That's truth, I said quietly. We sat like that for a beat. Just two women in a quiet glass room, both pretending we weren't holding decades between our teeth. Then the door opened. Lindsay stepped in holding a legal pad and a smoothie from the place downstairs. She stopped mid-step when she saw Bella. Oh, sorry, she said, already backing out. Bella stood, gathering her purse. No, I was just leaving. Her voice was clipped now, sunglasses back in place. As she passed Lindsay, she offered a quick, polite nod, then walked out the way she came in. Her heels clicked once, twice, and then faded. Lindsay stepped fully into the room once the door shut. She raised an eyebrow. Well, that was dramatic. I smiled faintly. Didn't even have to explain. She plopped into the seat Bella had vacated. Do you want me to chase her down and serve her a cease and desist for misusing your identity in a podcast? I laughed, really laughed for the first time that day. But thanks for the offer. We sat there, sunlight slanting across the glass, and for the first time in years I felt like I wasn't the one who had to leave the room to make everyone else comfortable. I had stayed. And she had walked out. The gallery used to be a church. You could still feel it in the bones of the building. The high ceilings held a kind of hush, the kind that made even footsteps sound sacred. Pale morning light poured through the old stained glass windows that had been replaced with minimalist panes. Everything inside was white. White walls, white floor, white pedestals in the corners that held nothing but air. I walked slowly, hands behind my back, scanning the arrangement one last time. 7 photographs. Hung deliberately, evenly spaced across the longest wall. Each one was printed on matte paper and framed in simple black, no labels, no artist statement. The first showed a pink birthday cake with one slice missing and no people in the frame. The second, a corner of a room, just the edge of a twin bed and a coat lying forgotten on the floor. The third, a blurred profile of a girl in a family photo out of focus while everyone else smiled at the camera. The fourth, a shadow cast on hospital curtains. The fifth, a voicemail transcript scrawled on a notepad, all names blacked out except one. The sixth, a wedding invitation with my name crossed out in ink. And the seventh, the final piece, hung at the far right. Larger than the rest. It was titled Reflection. A woman's silhouette back turned facing a window. Her face couldn't be seen, just the curve of her shoulders, the slight hunch like she had just exhaled something she had carried for too long. The glass in front of her reflected nothing. The figure looked like it might dissolve into the light. It was my favorite. People began trickling in slowly. Friends, colleagues, strangers in boots and wide scarves, gallery regulars who pretended not to read the press blurbs. Some stared longer than others. No one asked questions. No one needed to. I stood near the exit, watching quietly. Occasionally, someone would nod at me or smile politely. But most of them didn't recognize me. Until one man did. He wore a worn leather jacket and dark jeans. His beard was scruffy but trimmed. He looked at each photograph with a photographer's eye, lingering not just on the content but the grain, the crop, the way the light hit the edge of the frame. When he reached Reflection, he stood still for a long time. Then he turned and walked toward me. You're the artist. I nodded. Haley Grant. He extended his hand. Elliot Crane. The name struck something, I knew it. From headlines, photography journals, but also from something else. Bella had used it once. He saw the recognition in my eyes. Yeah, that's me. I met your sister a couple years back. She pitched me this humanitarian campaign. Big glossy thing. Cameras in third world hospitals, branding all over it. She said you were the inspiration behind the concept. My stomach tightened. She said what? That you were a survivor of something. That your story had moved her to act. She even showed me pictures of you. At the time, it seemed legit. I almost signed on. Why didn't you? He shrugged. Something felt off. Too scripted. I dug around. The nonprofit wasn't real. The funding was performative. And when I asked her too many questions, she stopped replying. I felt the burn behind my ribs. Old rage familiar. I'm sorry she used you. He waved it off. People try. It's rare to see someone do it right. But this, he gestured to the wall, this isn't trying to be anything. It just is. That last photo. The woman in the glass. It stayed with me. That's the one everyone's asking about, I said. Is it you? I looked at him, then at the photo. It didn't matter anymore whether people knew. It's the version of me that no one invited. The one they edited out. But she's still there. She's always been. He nodded once, then pulled out his phone and typed something. I'd like to buy it. Not for a client. For me. That piece deserves to be seen by someone who knows what it's saying. I blinked. You're sure? He smiled, soft but certain. This time I want to invest in a real story. No one playing a part. I handed him a print certificate and wrote down the edition number. Then he shook my hand again, tighter this time. Congrats, Haley. For telling it your way. He left before I could thank him properly. The door opened, the door closed. And inside, beneath the stillness of those white walls, I looked back at the 7 frames and thought, this was how I rebuilt memory. One picture at a time. It wasn't revenge I felt, not satisfaction either, just something clean. Like dust finally wiped off a frame that had been hanging crooked for too long. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. The rain tapped gently against the windows, and somewhere on the street a bus groaned to a stop. The city was moving as usual. But inside me everything had stilled. I didn't hesitate as I clicked compose. There was no subject line. No greeting. Just 2 attachments. The first a screenshot of a message from our mother dated 2 weeks before Bella's wedding. I had seen it by accident on Dad's phone when he handed it to me, asking me to take a picture at the rehearsal dinner I hadn't been invited to. The notification floated in like a paper cut. Let's not tell Haley. It'll just make her uncomfortable. I want everything to be smooth for Bella. She deserves that. I remembered blinking at the words, rereading them twice. Not angry. Just cold all over. I never told him I saw it. The second attachment was an audio clip, 43 seconds. A listener of the Grace and Gold podcast had sent it to me. I'd never heard the show before. But the title of the episode was The Woman Who Gave Me Wings. Bella's voice came through soft and glossy. My sister's life inspired me. She struggled so much but always kept going. I built my platform to honor her. This brand, this mission, it's really hers. She never asked. Never mentioned it. My name was listed in the podcast description, complete with a link to a manipulated photo of us laughing, except I wasn't laughing in the original. I wasn't even looking at her. Just looking away, lips parted mid-sentence. She had cropped out the context, like always. I hit send. I didn't write anything else. No explanation, no threat, no signature. Then I clicked over to her contact, pressed block, and when the screen asked me to confirm, I did. It wasn't a victory. Just a subtraction. I closed the laptop. Breathed. There was nothing theatrical about it. No pounding heart, no slam of doors. It felt more like setting down a bag that had bruised my shoulder for too many years. The next morning, I got an email from Carrie Wilson. Subject line: urgent termination of contract. Haley, thank you for bringing this to our attention. We have reviewed the materials and are terminating our brand partnership with Bella Whitman effective immediately. We are also issuing a statement regarding the use of your name, likeness, and personal narrative without consent. Authenticity is central to our values. If you'd like to speak further, feel free to reach out. Best Carrie Wilson. Creative Director Bravura and Company. I stared at the words, then read them again. I didn't feel vindicated, just seen. By a stranger. By someone who didn't owe me anything. I replied simply, "Thank you." No further comment needed. Then I closed the laptop again and turned toward the window. Outside, the clouds were breaking apart over the hills, not into sun, just space. Breathing room. That afternoon, I wandered into a small bookstore on Rainier Avenue. No one recognized me. No one whispered or stared. I bought a used collection of essays about silence. The woman at the register complimented my scarf. Later, I sat in my studio and rewatched one of my old time-lapse videos, ink bleeding across canvas, the slow pulse of story forming without shape. I hadn't posted it, hadn't shown anyone. It was never meant to go viral. It was just mine. I thought about deleting it, but instead I opened a new folder and labeled it quietly, "Begin Again." I made tea. The good kind. Loose leaf, not rushed. I let it steep long enough that it grew dark and earthy like the air after heavy rain. When my phone buzzed that evening, I saw 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. No voicemails. Just silence on record. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened a fresh notebook and wrote with a pen I had almost forgotten I owned. "No one gets to speak for me again." I underlined it once. Closed the cover. Then I folded laundry. I swept the floor. I took a long hot shower, and for the first time in years, I didn't rehearse any conversations in my head while the water ran. I didn't imagine any confrontations. Didn't win any invisible arguments. I just breathed. When I sat down that night alone but not lonely, I remembered something Bella once said when she was 16. "You're always going to be the one with the camera, Haley. I'll be the one people look at." She said it like it was a gift she was giving me. Like that was all I would ever want. But now finally I realized something. I didn't want to be looked at, I wanted to be seen. And now I was. Not by her. Not by our parents. By me. The envelope was pale blue, the kind my mother always kept in the hallway drawer next to the pens that didn't work and takeout menus from 3 years ago. My name was written in her slanted script, the one she used when signing Christmas cards. No return address, but the postmark was Miami. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter while I put the groceries away, while I steeped my tea, while I swept a corner of the kitchen that was already clean. Finally, I sat at the table and slid my finger under the flap. The paper was thin, 2 pages lined. Her handwriting looked smaller than I remembered. "Haley, the house has been very quiet. Your father goes into your room every morning and just stands there. I think he's trying to feel you still live here somehow. I heard him talking to himself once." I didn't interrupt. "I don't know how you left without a word. You always used to say goodbye, even when you were angry." She didn't ask where I was. She didn't say she missed me. Just those small details, like she was circling the real thing but never touching it. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and tucked it inside a drawer. No tears. No burning rage, just space. The next morning, I got a message from Laura, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "Hey. Is everything okay? Your mom's been posting a lot of old photos of you. Like middle school photos. Thought that was weird. Just wanted to check in." I stared at the screen. There was a time I would have responded instantly. Would have explained everything, would have tried to make sense of the senseless. Now I just powered off the phone and dropped it in my bag. It was humid outside. That thick Miami heat that wraps around your shoulders like a heavy scarf. I walked toward Little Havana, drawn to the sounds of old records playing out of corner stores and the warm scent of cafecito in the air. I hadn't meant to go anywhere specific. But my feet took me down Calle Ocho, past murals of poets and saints and faded lovers painted on cracked stucco. I stopped in front of a bright green storefront where a woman was selling paper flowers and mango slices with chili. I bought both. Further down there was a man playing the trumpet. He wasn't good. Not in the traditional sense, but he played like it meant something to him. That kind of broken melody that sinks under your skin and stays there. I lifted my camera and started shooting. Not with a plan. Not for a project. Just for me. A woman sitting on her stoop with rollers in her hair and a cat at her feet. A boy kicking a deflated soccer ball against a fence. A cracked window that caught the reflection of the setting sun like it was made of gold. These were the pieces I wanted to keep. I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when someone takes your picture. The other kind. The kind you forget you're even doing. The paper flowers wilted slightly in my hand as the day cooled down. I tucked them into my bag, not to save, just to carry. I passed a small bodega and saw a stack of newspapers in the window. The front page headline read, "Local Influencer Faces Scrutiny Over Misused Narrative." I didn't read the article. I already knew the story, and for once it wasn't mine to carry. Back in my apartment, I dropped my bag on the floor and opened the windows. The night air moved through the space like a breath finally released. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on the floor back against the wall. I let my legs stretch out, my arms fall limp at my sides. Just stillness. Just sound. The neighbors laughing above me. A motorcycle roaring down the avenue. Distant music from someone's open balcony. I thought about the silence my mother wrote about. It was never about volume. Our house had always been filled with noise. The clatter of dishes, the shrill tone of correction, the hum of television in the background. But none of it ever reached me. Not really. Now in the quiet of my own choosing, I heard everything more clearly. Later that night, I flipped through the photos I had taken. They weren't perfect. Some were too dark, some slightly out of focus, but they were honest, unposed, alive. I uploaded them to a private folder called Havana Echoes. No tags, no captions. Just color and light and the warmth of the street. And then I slept. Not restlessly, not as escape, just deeply. The kind of sleep that doesn't chase or flee. The kind that lets you wake up without armor. The knock came just as I was steeping my morning tea. 3 short taps. Not urgent. Not hesitant. Just there. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most people texted first and I hadn't made plans. The sun had barely crested over the rooftops, casting soft gold across the kitchen floor. I pulled the door open slowly. My father stood there holding a plain brown paper bag with both hands like it might tip if he let go. He looked thinner than I remembered. Not sickly, just smaller, like time had quietly trimmed pieces off of him while no one was watching. "Hi," he said. His voice was hoarse, like it hadn't been used in a while. Or maybe it just sounded different when it wasn't barking instructions across the dinner table. I stepped aside. He didn't ask to come in, he just bent slightly and placed the bag on the doormat. Inside, I could see a faded toy ambulance, the kind with chipped paint and squeaky wheels. A few Polaroids peeked out from under it, their corners curled and yellowing. "Your mom didn't know I was coming," he said, eyes still on the bag. This wasn't her idea, I nodded. Not because I approved or disapproved. Just acknowledgement. Just breath between two people who once shared a last name and now shared mostly silence. "I thought you might want these," he said. I almost threw them out, but then I thought maybe you should be the one to decide. He looked up finally. His eyes were bloodshot but dry. "I used to think you were the strong one. You never cried, you never broke. I thought that meant you were okay, that I didn't have to worry." He let out a short, dry laugh. I was wrong. I didn't say anything. Not out of anger, not out of pride. There was just nothing left to explain. And maybe he wasn't here for that. He shifted on his feet. "I thought being strong meant standing tall, holding things together, but you were just trying not to fall apart in front of us. And we didn't see it, or worse. We saw it and looked away." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny photograph, bent at the edges, worn thin at the fold. He held it like it was made of glass. "This was the only picture where you're in the center. We took it when you were 6, remember? At that old fairground outside Naples, you had cotton candy stuck to your hair." I remembered the day. I remembered the heat, the way my mother kept telling me to smile wider, and how I kept fidgeting because my shoes were too tight. I remembered being between them for once. Not beside, not behind. In the middle. He held it out to me. I took it. "I'm sorry," he said. Then quieter, "I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to have a choice in what to carry and what to leave behind." Then he turned and walked down the stairs. I didn't call after him. I didn't ask him to stay. I closed the door gently and stood with the bag in my arms, unsure where to put it. I sat on the floor and emptied the contents slowly. The toy ambulance was heavier than it looked. I ran my fingers over the chipped paint, remembering how I used to line up all my toy cars and narrate disasters just to fix them again. There were 4 Polaroids. One of me at a birthday party with cake on my nose. One with me and a neighbor's dog I had loved for a summer. One of a beach trip where I wore my favorite purple swimsuit, and the last, the one from the fairground. In the photo, my parents are smiling. I'm not. I'm looking off to the side, cotton candy in hand, lips slightly parted like I'm about to say something. I used to keep that photo framed on my bookshelf. Back in college, it made me feel like I had proof of something. Like I was loved, even if it had been complicated. But eventually the frame cracked and I packed the picture away. Told myself it didn't matter anymore. Now I stared at the image. At the version of myself caught between 2 adults who didn't yet know how to fail me. And I realized I didn't need the frame anymore. I folded the picture gently, not to hide it, but to store it in a place that didn't need to be visible to be real. I placed it in a drawer next to a bus ticket stub from New Orleans, a postcard I'd never sent, and a list of goals I'd written the night I moved here. Outside, a seagull cried as it dove across the sky. The city stirred below, muffled and alive. I made another cup of tea and watched the steam rise from the mug. Not searching for meaning, just being. Letting the silence fill the room like sunlight. There would be more days like this, and maybe one day a different kind of knock, but not today. Today, this quiet was enough. The city was still draped in that soft bluish hush when I stepped out onto the sidewalk. A light fog curled along the curbs, wrapping the street lights in halos. I carried the keys to the gallery in one hand, a warm coffee in the other, my breath visible as I exhaled slowly. The world hadn't rushed in yet, and I was grateful. Mornings like this were the kind that felt like blank pages. Inside, the gallery smelled faintly of old wood and new paper. The alarm beeped once as I disarmed it, then silence reclaimed the space. I didn't turn on the lights. The natural glow spilling through the front windows was enough, illuminating the soft white walls and reflecting gently off the polished floors. I walked slowly past the pieces. Some familiar, some less so. But each of them mine. Each of them a thread pulled from something I had lived and laid bare. My steps brought me to the centerpiece. Uninvited. It hung slightly off-center, just the way I'd intended. I never wanted it to feel staged. The photo had no frame, no border to contain it. Just raw image meant to be experienced, not admired. I stared at it. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight of memory pressing on my chest. I remembered taking that photo. The quiet corner of the reception hall. The glass still full, the place card with a name no one bothered to spell correctly. A seat at a table I was never really part of. I hadn't cried that night. Not then. I just watched. But what I didn't realize until later was that I wasn't just watching. I was witnessing. Recording. And when I pressed the shutter, I wasn't capturing loss. I was preserving truth. The truth that I had been there. I'd existed in that moment, even if they pretended otherwise. My fingers brushed the corner of the canvas. A small tear had started to form at the edge, just enough to notice. I smiled at it. Imperfect. Honest. Like me. The door behind me creaked open, letting in a burst of colder air and the familiar scent of vanilla hazelnut. Lindsay's boots clicked softly against the floor. "You open early now?" she asked, setting a coffee on the front desk. I shrugged. Needed the quiet. She followed my gaze to the photo. "Still hits, doesn't it?" "Yeah," I said. "But different now." She studied it for a moment, then glanced at me. Are you okay? I turned fully toward her. For a long time, I wasn't sure how to answer that question. Okay meant so many things. Safe, settled, unbothered. But now I understood something else. I used to wait for them to come back, I said. To realize what they'd done. To fix it. And now I'm just trying to live a life I don't need to explain. Her smile was soft, unintrusive. The kind you give someone who's been underwater and finally surfaced. We sat for a while on the bench across from the photograph. Not to talk. Just to be. Eventually she left murmuring something about her sister's birthday brunch. I stayed behind. I opened the drawer beneath the counter and pulled out the photo my father had left me, the one where I was 6 standing between him and Mom holding a balloon twice my size. It was the only picture I ever remembered being centered in. I'd kept it in a frame for years, believing it meant something permanent. But today I slipped it from the frame. Just held the photo as it was. A memory. A moment. Not a promise. I set the frame aside. I didn't need it anymore. They used to know me. They knew the girl who apologized first, who stepped aside, who took the photos but never appeared in them. They knew the one who said yes before she even knew what was being asked. But they don't know me now. They don't know the woman who rebuilt her life from a single shutter click. Who stopped waiting for a seat at the table and built her own studio instead. And maybe that's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Because now I don't need them to know me. I know me. And if you've ever found yourself left out of the picture, if you've ever stood behind the scenes while everyone else posed in the spotlight, I hope you'll say something. Leave a comment, tell me your story. I see you. I hear you. And I hope wherever you are, you're writing the next chapter of your life with your own hands.